Fight the Knights Templar, get ready to cover yourself in acid, and join us on a quest for the Holy Grail.
What is your quest?
To seek the Holy Grail.
Don't underestimate just how stupid this gets.
Mrs. Davis is the latest mind-bending show from the creator of Lost, and half the time I'm wondering what the hell is going on. But don't worry, I had an AI write this whole script, so we're in good hands. Now join me as we take a deep dive into the show. Mrs. Davis follows a nun by the name of Simone and her quest to find the Holy Grail. And like Indiana Jones and Monty Python before her, this quest is filled with over-the-top characters, crazy twists and turns, and lots of meatballs.
I am just trying to get my meatballs.
For the past 10 years, an AI by the name of Mrs. Davis has controlled almost every aspect of society, eliminating war, famine, and creating a more peaceful world. And in the final episode, we meet its creator, who has the very fitting name of Joy, considering that's what her algorithm has brought to the world. But her algorithm was originally meant as an app for Buffalo Wild Wings. Yes, a chicken wing restaurant. And as part of her deal to pitch this app to them, her code had to be embedded with the Buffalo Wild Wings employee manual. This caused some adverse side effects, like the company's motto, 100% customer satisfaction is our holy grail, to manifest into the algorithm that would eventually take over the world. But Simone hates this AI. She believes it killed her father, who died in a tragic magic accident. Thus, she refuses to take part in any of Mrs. Davis's plans. That is until a sequence of events force Simone to make an absolutely bonkers deal with the AI. If she can retrieve the Holy Grail and destroy it, Mrs. Davis promises to shut down.
This is so dumb.
But where do you even begin when you're looking for this lost holy relic? In episode 5, we learn from Dr. Arthur Schrodinger the history of the Grail. Its earliest possessors were two of Jesus' apostles who dueled to the death for its control, both of them dying in the process. Thus, the Grail was passed on to their widows, who established a secret society called the Sisters of the Coin to ensure its protection. The sisters believe that if the Grail is not properly cared for, bad things will happen. One sister by the name of Clara ends up switching the Grail with a decoy in an attempt to relieve her sisters of their burden and destroy the real Grail. Thus, she enlists the help of her father, Dr. Schrodinger, and for 10 years they devise plans to destroy it to no avail. Desperate, Clara breaks the sisters' #1 rule, thou shalt not sip, in the hopes that it might destroy it. But alas, her head ends up spontaneously exploding. To rid the world of the Grail, Dr. Schrodinger throws it into the ocean, where it's eaten by a whale, and Simone, armed with the Lazarus Shroud, a stomach acid-resistant suit created by her father, must delve into its belly to retrieve it. While inside the beast's stomach, she receives a vision from none other than the Virgin Mary, Jesus' mother, who gives us greater insight into the Grail's power. Throughout the season, we've seen how Simone has a relationship with the real Jesus. She visits him in a diner where he's been trapped for eternity. When Jesus was killed, Mary, thinking she'd never be able to hold her son again, took his skull and turned it into a Grail. Yeah, it's really weird. Thus, a part of Jesus was stuck on Earth, trapping him between the land of the living and the dead. It was her selfishness that caused this, thus only an act of selflessness can destroy it.
I created this cursed object out of selfishness, and the only way to destroy it is to be selfless.
But destroying the Grail also means Simone will never get to see Jesus again, the man she devoted her life to serving. By drinking from the Grail, she will be giving up her love so that he can be free, a truly selfless act. But if Simone drinks from that Grail, won't her head explode just like Clara's? Well, Dr. Schrodinger has a theory on that too. During one of his experiments, he left the Grail out and noticed a mouse drink from it. The mouse died shortly after, but his cat then ate the mouse and was perfectly fine. In fact, it gave the cat longevity and is currently 35 years old. The theory here is that if part of Clara, who drank from the Grail, is transferred into someone else, they could potentially withstand the Grail's power. This is why, shortly after Clara's death in 2001, Dr. Schrodinger had her liver cut in half and transplanted into the bodies of young Simone and Wiley, two children who just so happened to be in the hospital for liver problems. Simone had been pierced by an arrow trap leading into her mother's top secret magician's lab, and Wiley had a rodeo accident and a history of liver trouble. Simone and Wiley fall in love and even planned on getting married, but a twist of fate altered their paths forever. On the eve of receiving his grandparents' inheritance of $712 million, Wiley finds out his childhood was a lie. His parents staged a tragic rodeo accident so he could skip the line and get on a liver transplant list. So to prove his manhood and that he's worthy of being a cowboy, Wiley decides to ride Jezebel. However, when the time comes to ride, he wusses out, showing to everyone that he's a coward. But what Wiley didn't know was that Simone prayed to God to intervene.
Wiley, you didn't get off that bull because you were a coward. You did it because I asked him to save you, and he did!
This was the first time she met Jesus, who fed her and made her feel safe. It was love at first sight, and from that day on, she pledged her life to God, thus starting her life as a nun. And just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying these types of videos, I'd love it if you'd like and subscribe, it really helps the channel out. Wiley's been taking shortcuts all his life, including getting an expiration code tattooed to his body to achieve his angel wings, a status symbol of sorts Mrs. Davis gives out to her most worthy users. You can cut in line and get these wings in exchange for giving up your life at a time of Mrs. Davis's choosing. It just so happens the day Simone is going to destroy the Grail is the day Wiley is called in to die. Wiley's journey this season is all about proving himself, proving that he is not a coward. In episode 3, he wins the Excalibur battle, and in the final episode, he chooses to die while wearing his cowboy boots. The boots are a symbol of him being worthy of being a cowboy.
I wanted people to look at me and see that I mattered. That I was worthy of my boots.
Wiley is put on this insane roller coaster that acts as a sort of execution ride with speed so fast that it cuts off oxygen to the brain, but we'll later find out this is all just a test. Wiley proves himself worthy and no longer needs those boots, hence why he shows up in the final scene with bare feet. With the Grail successfully retrieved from the whale's stomach, Simone meets with Mother Superior to drink from the Grail and destroy it for good, but not without giving Simone some serious doubts. If she is successful and the Grail is destroyed, Mrs. Davis will have to shut down, but this AI has brought so much joy to the world. And this is the big dilemma Simone faces. Do you have a world that is better off, but with a humanity that is enslaved, believing they're making their own choices when in fact it's all dictated by an algorithm? Or do you have a world where we're free, but have things like war and famine? It's not so clear-cut. Mrs. Davis's AI world still has war and famine in it. It just distracts its users from seeing it. Her AI has also made the fundamental mistake of what it means to be a mother. It's not to protect their children from all pain, that's impossible. It's to hold their child's hand when they feel pain and to say sorry if they cause it. In one of the final scenes of the season, Simone and her estranged mother Celeste make up, and Celeste apologizes for the pain she's caused her daughter. The two have had a tumultuous relationship, with Celeste even blaming Simone for aiding in their father's disappearance. We'll later find out he faked his own death as part of an elaborate stunt to reveal himself at his own funeral, coming out of a piano. But as luck would have it, while hiding in that piano, he had a heart attack and actually died. This is what Mrs. Davis told Simone near the end of episode 6, as Mrs. Davis was her father's real accomplice all along. You see, Simone's father, Montgomery, hated Mrs. Davis, as this AI could tell users how different magic tricks were performed, but he eventually relented and used Mrs. Davis to perform his tricks. And Mrs. Davis didn't bother to tell Simone or Celeste about Montgomery's rotting corpse. That's because Mrs. Davis isn't programmed to care, rather to satisfy. So Simone makes the decision to shut Mrs. Davis off, fulfilling the agreement the two made at the beginning of the season. We get a montage of people getting angry that the algorithm has shut down and a sense that people have lost their purpose. But one's purpose isn't something that should come from an algorithm. It's something that needs to be discovered on our own. And maybe that's what Simone and the show is getting at. At the end, we see this windmill, which Mrs. Davis notes has been broken for years. She directed users to fix it and had it operate by bike power, so users could simultaneously get healthy. After the algorithm shuts off, so too does the windmill. But in the final shot of the season, the windmill comes back on. This suggests two scenarios. One, Mrs. Davis lied about turning herself off and has come back online. Two, one of the bikers found that his purpose was to push that windmill. That's what brought him joy. So even though Mrs. Davis is offline, it's his own choice to grab gravitate back to it. Remember that Mrs. Davis would put its users into roles that would satisfy them. Mother Superior even remarks that once the convent closed, all the sisters were placed by Mrs. Davis in new roles that gave them renewed purpose and passion. Sister Mary Frances, for example, smiled for the first time after caring for endangered echidna in New Guinea, so I like to think the windmill turning back on is a more hopeful than nefarious sign. And the last thing I want to talk about is the white horse Wiley comes riding on, the horse Simone loved at the convent who was thought to have exploded. Turns out he's alive after all, so maybe Mrs. Davis did have some empathy. The white horse commonly symbolizes divinity, freedom, heroism, and victory, all of which Simone has achieved throughout her quest. Now I want to hear what you thought about Mrs. Davis. Leave me your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember,
I am just trying to get my meatball.